Piffle. I think it's really
I have not heard of it. Can you please educate me?
yeah. So I'm looking up the actual definition because it's really funny. To speak about unimportant matters rapidly and incessantly in a trivial or effective way.
I
So,
like it.
what's up? Other
Accurate. I
options:
love it.
Marky, fiddle faddle. Old timey nonsense.
Very fitting. I like it.
Right?
Welcome, Piffle.
I thought it was fun.
I hope I'm saying that correctly. Pronouncing
Yeah,
it
I
right,
think
Piffle.
so. I don't think it's a word that people use anymore.
We're making it happen.
We're making it happen. What's your
To
process
just
this morning?
My process was wake up hungover and start reading and piecing together the most recent thing that's happened. So finally, that timeline popped up, which is super cool. The most recent update is weakened federal employee unions, which it brings a smile to my face because what the fuck do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, here's what brought a smile to my face when I started looking up trackers and stuff. I was like, wow, first of all, there's a ton of them.
hmm
Second of all, this one, which I find particularly enticing, which we can like drop links and stuff, is the fact that it started on Reddit and it's completely open source. So it's almost like a Wikipedia of this effort. And you can like donate to it, but it's
Oh,
basically
nice.
crowdsourced, right? You are the media now. They're all like, no, but they're all like, they provide all of the sources both for the action and then as well as the coverage on that action. So if you go to it, you can see the White House EO, and then underneath of it, you can see AP News or PBS or something, their coverage on it explaining what it did. I appreciate that. And I thought that that was cool. And it was something that came out of like a crowdsource, which made me feel like not alone in the ether and tracking this type of stuff. There are a bunch of think tanks and caucuses doing certain things too. PBS this week on the news hour had Angelo Carusone on talking about tracking Project 2025, and he's like an expert on it now. He's the guy who runs Media Matters. And that was interesting to listen to about how the positioning is working, and like that was the major goal. And yeah, it was one interesting to look at. Okay, first of all, we don't need to recreate the wheel.
hmm
And second of all, but I was excited for this hour this morning because I was
Yay.
a box that we get to rabble in, and then we can like put it away after this, and it doesn't have to be so over researched or perfect. And I want to set the expectation there. I just smoked my morning J and I'm having a cup of coffee. I'm just going to use the existing knowledge in my head to rabble against like what I heard this week. We can talk about the union stuff. We can go back and use those trackers as anchors to kind of keep us grounded. I think in an informational blitzkrieg, it feels confusing, and the point of it is executive dysfunction. But if we can anchor in some reality validating points, which is even just this was the plan, this is what happened this week, this is how you should think about it in regards to your everyday liberties, great. It can kind of keep us on track there, and it can feel less overwhelming. I think that there's something to catharsis, right? We get to be angry that this is happening and we didn't vote for it, and freedom is real and all the things. I think tracking an everyday person's experience as their kind of falls to fascism needs a heavy dose of comedy.
It does. We all do. I trust Reddit with my life, by the way. I trust Reddit with my life. So the fact that this is like immediately valid,
It's like the
validated.
OG resistance, right? Reddit somehow didn't get 4chanified, which is what I'm calling what's happening to our reality.
Yeah.
And I don't know like how it didn't get 4chanified, but it didn't.
Okay, wait. I'm a Gen Zer. What does 4chanified mean?
Oh, are you familiar with what 4chan is?
I mean, I think so. It's like
Okay,
the
it's like 4chan is like the dark web, right? 4chan
yeah.
is where all the like Nazis used to hang. A lot of
Yeah.
that, but it was also just like the unregulated web. Very beginnings of internet meme culture started at 4chan. Pepe, I believe, started at 4chan. Now there's 8chan and whatever, but also notorious for like Nazis hang out in their forums.
Yep.
So yeah. So when I talk about the 4chanification of something, I'm like deregulation to the point of it becoming a cesspool, which like
Yep.
that's what happened to Twitter. Now it's just bots and trash, and you can't even break through the noise. It's not a useful platform anymore. You can say that about a bunch of stuff. Craigslist, right? Like if you just get overrun with spam and bullshit, then you have been 4chanified.
Mm,
So like, you know, mainstream media, podcast culture,
yeah.
the incels got to it and ruined it. So we have to
I
go make.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank God Reddit has not been 4chanified. And
The
also,
White House is being 4chanified at the moment. Like that's what we're talking about. There's also
wait.
a word thing floating around called the enshittification of America, and I'm like, yep.
I just noticed on this tracker about a couple weeks ago they defunded the US AGM. And my only experience with that is I thought that the US AGM funded all major media sources. I'm a little confused by that because don't they want more control over the media?
I mean, okay, so like control is relative. Do they want U.S. agency to have more control over it, or do they want private companies like Twitter and OpenAI to have control over it and function on government contracts,
Right.
which they all buy? It's not that it's never really a one-to-one. Where's the money going and where is it coming from, and how does this change that? Look at the budgets.
Ugh.
I'll show you the values. Yeah, no, it's
I'm in love with this tracker. It's like I'm this is such a strange feeling because it's like institute a pause and review of all grants. Like it's infuriating, but then at the same time I'm like, wow, there's a date and there's actual straight language like abolish,
that's what I mean.
withdraw.
Like being rooted in some sort of truth, shared truth and reality, which is
Wow.
we need right now, especially when truth and reality is being erased. I don't know if you saw what is happening with the Smithsonian's this week, but it's a real bummer.
Oh, tell me please.
So they're going in and editing and censoring the archives, literally changing history. Some Orwellian 1984 shit. Right. Trump executive order Smithsonian targets funding for programs with, quote, improper ideology, anti-American ideology. Doesn't this smack of McCarthyism and like pinkos and like,
Yes.
eliminate anti-American ideology from the Smithsonian. This is just some classic fascist shit, right? Hey, we're just going to like revise history. But you know what's great? And this is the kind of stuff that we need to dive deeper into. But there are people on Reddit who are like, yo, I'm putting this stuff on the blockchain, the old stuff. This is where use that tech, put some stuff immutably out there to ground us all in reality. You know what I mean? To be like, no. You erased that on this date because it used to be on there. What's even going to happen in the National Museum of Women in the Arts?
Oh, it abolished. It's
Cool.
going to be poof. It's going to be Mandela affected. We're like, was that a thing?
Cool. Whatever.
Did you hear about Enola Gay? The Enola Gay incident?
Oh, yeah.
I just
recall it. Like, word, yeah. Say it out loud.
So the Enola Gay was the famous plane that dropped the atomic bomb. And there's a couple military officials. I think there's one specifically whose last name had gay in it, and apparently his documents were deleted or everything, where they're trying to delete them from the archives. And that's a big red flag because, I mean, the Enola Gay is quite literally the most famous plane in the history of American history. And the only reason they deleted it is because it had gay in it. And they just went Control F gay delete. It's laughable.
You hear that and you're like, that's so absurd and stupid and funny. And then you're like, oh, wait. And then also our 44-year-old defense secretary messaged an Atlantic journalist on Signal about woodland. And you're like, really? This is the stupidest timeline I've ever heard. Is this America's gas leak season that won't end? First of all, why are you using Signal? Second of all, you're the American military. Second of all, why is my boyfriend older than you? Third of all, feels like you should be older if you're doing this job. Feels like you should be a veteran with a 4-star general, at least,
I mean, with like any kind of relevant experience, just a little bit. Maybe.
I'm gonna find out he's also bringing his wife into meetings because I guess he needs supervision or something. Mike Pence, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why would you? First of all, put her in danger like that. But second of all, just by proximity, right?
Yeah.
Dumb. More people in the know is more people to manipulate. That's how like foreign relations work. I don't understand.
So let's be cynical for a minute.
Yeah.
So let's say they leaked those messages on purpose. What purpose could you fathom for them to do that?
Because they're distracting from some other bigger shit that just happened. You
Wow.
know what I mean? Like they're,
Fuck.
hey, let's not talk about the actual violence that occurred. Let's just talk about the messages
Yep.
around the violence that were so egregious. You know what I mean? Also, there's a part of me that's like, are they smart enough for any of that? Or are they just, is this all just blatant incompetence, which is more of a bummer?
It's just pure idiocracy.
The nukes are a little bit smarter than that, right? You want to be like, hey, come on. I'm just going to swing it all the way back to a classic. And what about the emails? We're worried. We were so pissed off about Hillary Clinton's emails and how she put our national defense at risk or some fucking shit. And now we have our baby SecDef sending messages to journalists on a private commercial application discussing war plans. Why are we using Signal?
Do they not have any internal?
You have the entire American military and intelligence at your disposal. They could create an encrypted messaging app for you in like 4 seconds. What is the point of that?
I mean, I kind of trust Signal more now.
Right? Like, was all of them had shares in Signal, and then this was all just to like pump their own bags in some
weird marketing campaign, but okay.
Honestly, I wouldn't put it past them. Trump also dropped a USD1 stable coin, or World Liberty Financial did. Which, what are we even doing, guys? What? And they're trying to get rid of this Consumer Protection Bureau, which is not surprising. That was
something I wanted to talk about. Doge can't exist. It can't. I don't know how it's doing anything.
So there's a lot of technicalities around it. And this is why this coup that just happened was so confusing. Because it was procedural and heavy, and it depends on a lot of if-thens through like a politically philosophical lens. You know what I mean? I can explain it kind of. Mm-hmm. And this is oversimplified. Let's break it down. DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, to create an official agency and appoint a leader to that official agency, you need congressional approval. That never happened, right? He's not secretary of something because you have to get Senate approval or congressional approval for secretary of something. So notice he's not a secretary of anything. He is a special government appointee. And we started doing this back in the day. This is not new. The Democrats did this when they appointed a bunch of czars during Obama's administration because the Republicans were blocking everything and being super annoying. So to get anything done, they were like, fuck this, we're just going to create czars. Well, then everybody started doing it. And then we started degrading congressional appointee status. I don't mean to be like, it's Democrats' fault. I want to give historical context. Procedural workarounds have been used forever because of procedural resistance and like performative procedural activism. And the GOP is really good at that. Mitch McConnell, that was all his whole shit. That was his whole chess game. A lot of this stuff makes it gray area. That's why you're like, was it a coup?
Wild.
So Elon is technically the way that he's designated within the government system or whatever. He's like a special government employee or something. So he's not a secretary. He's not given these leadership. However, there is a mismatch between what a special government employee can do and what a secretary can do and what he's doing. He's acting as the secretary, but he's like, but nah, I'm a special government employee. So, but he's like LARPing, right? And so special government employee, the power he has is more of like a secretariat level power, except for he was never congressionally approved or appointed for that. So you could argue that what DOGE is and everything they've done is completely null and void because they were never congressionally approved. Now, you can also claim that their seizure of power in this way and like enforcing or executive actions, an unapproved government agency or an illegitimate government agency gaining access to all of Americans' healthcare data, things like that, like social security numbers like they did, you could see that as like a coup because if you don't actually feel like they're legitimate, then their practice of that executive function was then usurping the current executive. And that is a condition that qualifies it as a coup d'etat. But you're already bored. You know what I mean? Like I've spent 5 minutes explaining this and you're already like what the no one cares. And so you're like, eggs are still expensive, right? And you're like, yeah, eggs still suck. No one cares, even if they, it's not, people are like, there's going to be the French Revolution. No one's paying attention.
Unfortunately, I care so deeply about the invalidity of this organization. So Keep going.
Here's
Keep
the
explaining.
thing, like, right? They're fucking up the whole social contract. What the social contract dictates. I'm talking about the social contract as is defined by John Locke, as is the underlying principles philosophically for the U.S. Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Let's go back to that, which is leaders, rulers have to have the consent of the governed. And what we're doing right now is convincing people that their consent is being violated. And it's taking a lot. Like, it's taking a lot of time because they're not going to know that or get angry about it until they feel the pain. And if you're removed from who's feeling the most pain, which right now is the federal workforce, with like what keeps the fucking machine going and your IRS and fucking like social security checks coming, they're just going to keep doing that. They're not going to feel the pain until the downstream effects hit, which is probably in 6 months to a year. Which is a bummer, right? People and activists and people who give a shit have been screaming at the top of their lungs for the past 2 decades, being like, yo, this is a problem. Honestly, this is the advent of the Federalist Society. There have been Democratic liberal scholars who were like, yo, dude, this is getting out of control.
You see what I'm seeing?
And everyone's like, nah, you're dramatic. And here we are.
Oh my goodness.
Like,
I wanted to tell you. This reminded me of a story. While I was abroad, I met for the first time in my life a 22-year-old who voted Trump, who went, it was the lesser of two evils. And
saying Kamala was evil?
he said, I voted for Trump because it was the lesser of two evils. And
White?
yes, a 22-year-old white boy. And I knew they existed. I knew there were people in my generation who
I will bet
were
$1,000 he listens to Joe Rogan.
100%. I was like, they exist. It's weird because I knew them in theory, but it seeing one in the wild, I mean, I was so triggered and I wish I hadn't got upset.
Statistically that he voted for Trump, right? Isn't that statistically true? So what you're saying is I haven't ever met one in real life. Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
Statistically, everyone you meet probably did. Flip a coin, they probably did. That's the denial part that I need people to really get on board with. Like,
the denial is
they're
strong,
everywhere.
But here I am. I have to face my reality.
They're everywhere, and they all look like alpacas.
It was such an exercise in regulating my nervous system and not screaming at the top of my lungs. It was late at night, and I probably had one cocktail or two. And he said that, and I was angry. I got so angry. I got viscerally, how can you be a fucking dumbass? And then I had to be like, wait, that's what they want. They want me to get angry. They want me to be upset about this divide when we actually need to be talking to each other and show curiosity over criticism. And I was going through all my therapy lessons. But I just, I did not want to make connection with this person after he said that. And I did anyway. Proud of myself.
How I approach them, which is a little bit more absurd. When people say that shit to me, I'm like, you know what? We're going to lean in, you know? Like, I can't empathize, right? You have to put a little bit of a shield up there. You're not going to try to change this person's mind. So you can't take it personally. The energy towards anger in that moment, it's not useful, right? But it could be really funny. Right? So when I met a flat earther in real life, my response to that was, if you believe the earth is flat, I need to know all about your other insane beliefs about the human condition. I need to know everything. So yeah, tell me more. Why do you think this? And he told me that he thought there was like a big science lobby and all of the aerospace engineers were actually CGI engineers, and everything we've ever seen about space was CGI images.
They're all in on it.
And then you told me to look it up on the internet, and I was like, my dude, that's a satellite. That's how the internet works. It still makes for an entertaining story, and I didn't get mad at all, because here's the thing, there was no way I was changing his mind by getting angry. And if you really want to make someone angry, all you have to do is make fun of them. Their biggest fear is being laughed at, so do that.
Just laugh at them.
I'm still getting mileage out of it, and in those situations where you're like, am I going to put my energy towards convincing this kid that he's wrong with some logical, impassioned, emotional argument? No, but if you catch him saying out loud the ridiculous contradiction and he gets humiliated, he will remember it forever.
Very true. It is very true. Thankfully abroad, like when he did say that, everyone was like, are you sure you want to admit that? That's the first thing they ask an American tourist. Did you vote for Trump?
Honestly, it's a good litmus test of how deranged you are and how connected to reality you are. Not to say all Trump supporters are deranged, but they're definitely not connected to the reality of the rest of the world, right? The shared understanding of the rest of the world.
So then when it inevitably happens again, role play, what should I ask? Hey, I voted for Trump. It was the lesser of two evils. I can't.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. What did you find more evil or less evil about the convicted rapist than you did about the seasoned prosecutor? That's really interesting.
Oh my, that's really interesting.
It's wild that you would feel safer with the judgment of an octogenarian felon than you would an able-minded and bodied constitutional scholar. That's a wild contradiction that I would love to unpack.
Writing this down.
Or you could start with something real simple. What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Like, what do you mean? Or if you really want to go wide with it and like you're really philosophical, because I feel like 22-year-old men really like to hear themselves talk, how would you define evil?
Ooh.
When you say that, do you find Trump more ethical and moral? I would love to learn more about that perspective, right? And then did you read Camus? Depends on what kind of douchebag this is. We can go, where does he lie on the IQ spectrum? How educated is he? We could go full philosophical cognitive dissonance, or we can go very basic, like crime and punishment.
Simple as best. Get them to talk it out. Get them to reason it out. Why waste my intellectual energy?
Literally the best thing I learned from living in the South and from the Southern ladies, older Southern ladies, is just the phrase, now why would you say that? And then just wait. If anyone ever says something fucked up, it doesn't even matter what flavor of fucked up. It could be racist, it could be misogynist, it could just be rude. You can just be like, now why would you say that? And just wait. And it works like 90% of the time.
Now why would you say that?
It doesn't raise your heart rate. You don't have to go on a diatribe. You do no mental work. You don't have to educate them. They just have to say the quiet part out loud. That's all that has to happen in that exchange.
No, why would you say that? I feel so much ready to take on the world. I wish it didn't make me so angry at the time.
Here's the thing, like, the thing that's going to save me throughout this is how high stakes is this interaction? And if it's super low stakes, you might as well make it funny. Or it's not worth having. Or you just go, I'm not interested in this conversation anymore and leave. I don't want to give my energy to you if that's where you live. That's fine. Bye.
Bye.
Protect that energy. Narcissists feed off of it. So do idiots, opportunists. Yeah, fuck that.
So I'm looking back at the timeline and I'm like, eliminate the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman. I don't know much about this department.
Say it again.
The Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman. And I can share. I have a CBS link.
Reviews cases submitted by or on behalf of individuals affected by misconduct, excessive force, or violations of laws, rights, policies, or standards who are in immigration detention. So the people who are the whistleblowers for the torturers, they just fired them. So there's no oversight now for human rights violations.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to get rid of. Classic fascist move. I encourage everyone listening to this. I think everyone should watch Death of Stalin. It's my favorite movie of all time, but also because it's a really it's a satirical take on a fall of a fascist regime, and it's funny. And Steve Buscemi's in it, and I don't know. It's a stark mirror reflection of our current time or where we're going. Because I don't care if you're communist or if you're capitalist, fascism is still fascism. There's a lot of parallels, and I would invite people to be able to laugh at it and realize the culture we're adopting, which is Putin's culture.
Where can our lovely audience find it?
I think I bought it on Amazon. It's also banned in Russia and Kyrgyzstan, I think. Because what narcissists hate the most is to be laughed at. And I just really want to drive that home. That part of theater and divine comedy and most performing art started in resistance. If nothing else, I really hope this era of American culture produces some quality art.
Yeah. I haven't been keeping up with Saturday Night Live. I like it, but the most recent episode I heard about was the one with Ryan Reynolds in it, where he's trying too hard, or he even talks about the lawsuit he's going through that's basically destroying his image. Do I trust Saturday Night Live anymore? I don't know.
I don't know. They had Elon Musk on. They keep crashing on. You know what I mean?
I will admit that Elon Musk episode was the worst episode I've ever seen.
There's a contradiction in those shows from the design of them. They are still on a corporate-backed network. Shows like SNL are sometimes tasked with carrying heavier cultural narratives than they can handle or should be expected to handle when they write, rehearse, and produce a show every single week. I think you have to realize what you're asking for. And they have competing priorities like viewership and pop culture and, name them. But I loved the Chappell Roan episode.
True. I was going to ask you, okay, how are we going to survive these next 4 years? And you were like, well, honestly, the comedy that comes out of time of crisis is next level. Have you interacted with any good comedy or good relevant satire and want to link it here? Because we also want that self-care piece of the podcast of, yes, the shit's going down. The plane is going down.
In this time, what do I listen to? I like the dark and sardonic. Maria Bamford, Mark Maron. I don't know if they have new stuff out. I don't think they do right now. Even their stuff from 2016 until now is relevant. Rinse and repeat. We're in the second part of this regime takeover. So voices like that. I'm praying Bo Burnham releases something else because inside wrecked me. It was just next level. I would love a period on the political landscape, not just what was happening with COVID. So these are the moments where you listen to more marginalized voices too, because these are the times you make sure that you're voting with your dollar and your attention and supporting the voices that are going to be targeted most. That is what solidarity looks like on an everyday level. That's like buying tickets to those artist shows and making sure that they're getting views and visibility when they get shadow banned. And arts broadly has such a value in activism and the creation of culture and the expression of the social contract. Art is at the heart of every social movement. I think we lean into putting our resources, attention in this way of healthy coping during this time period. If the nation state is literally attacking arts institutions. They just renamed the Kennedy Center the Donald J. Trump Kennedy Center or some shit. And Hamilton was like, all right, I guess we're not coming. That is how the narrative, we get more divided and the narrative gets changed. But they're gutting the Smithsonian's, come full circle. They're gutting the Smithsonian's of, quote, DEI stuff or anti-American ideology. That's any challenging the dominant narrative. So what we need to do, okay, if the nation state's going to abdicate its responsibility to uphold these voices and support them, then it is now our responsibility to do so. And if it's not through collective action and democratic institutions, because our institutions are no longer democratic, then it needs to be within the private sector. We need to create our own spaces. This became a diatribe about creative placemaking. And creative expression and art is the way that we're going to connect with each other and find joy and resistance. And if you can't find joy and resistance, we're all going to be burnt out and useless. So lean into the dark, right? Lean into the shadow. I know comedy helps you lean into that fucking pain to make it and to galvanize it into something real. And I think that that's important, because if not, then it just fucking destroys you. And we did that once. We had him in office. We did the whole how do we rage against the machine thing. Now, fuck that. How do we create our own spaces that are impenetrable? How are we moving forward and leaving them behind if they don't want to be part of this? Art is a huge catalyst on
that. While I was abroad, somebody from the UK was like, it's already changed to Gulf of America. And I was like, what? And they pulled up their Google map, and there it was, the Gulf of America.
So stupid.
And my opinion is that it should be the Gulf of Canada, US, and Mexico, or shortened version, the Gulf of Cum.
Cute. Cute. How about we just named it whatever the fucking Native Americans called it when they lived there? How about we do that?
Right?
Whoever was living there before the white people came, what'd they call it? Let's call it that.
And when they're deleting any anti-American sentiment, that's just all of American history. America does a great job of being anti-America just by existing.
That's what I'm saying. That's the fascist 101, right? That's the playbook. If you can shape people's view of reality and you can tinker with it, you have the most control. Free thought is the biggest challenge to that control, because if you can't control someone's truth or reality, you can't manipulate their decision. At the very psychological basic level, that's what we're talking about. And anyone who's ever been in an abusive relationship with a controlling spouse can confirm that this is a human nature thing. Fascism is just that at the collective government level. What do you do? How do you fucking deal with a narcissist? That's what we need to be doing. That, and even in the most basic ways. Remember when all the cool kids excluded you, and then you got together with all your nerd friends, and you're like, well, if the cool kids don't want to hang out with us, then we're gonna make our own party. And then you made your own party, and it was so good that the cool kids wanted to come. That is literally what we're doing.
Creative placemaking. I love it.
We're like with nukes. And they are the current administration is so set on everyone coming to their party, and then their party, we have all of these controls. And what if we just don't go to that party though? What does it look like for us to just go, I'm just going to opt out of this contract because you've changed your stance on it and you're not fulfilling your side. So I don't really want to fulfill my side. The old way of thinking about that is like, okay, revolution or civil war. And it's okay, but like, what does it look like to not either of those things in our current world that's super globalized and mobile? What does it look like to spend your capital differently? What does it look like to retake or take back your economic power within a global market when you're in a country that is oppressive? This isn't a new problem.
Nope.
It is a new problem for Americans.
Yep.
Look at every other country that we've colonized or imperialized in some capacity over the last 200 years. Like, they get it. Ask them. We were due. We are young. We're 250 years old. Yeah, we probably should revisit the Constitution. It probably shouldn't be a strong-armed, almost 80-year-old geriatric felon. Maybe he shouldn't be, or the megalomaniac tech baron next to him. Maybe they shouldn't be the ones leading the ethical process here.
Maybe. You would think so, but all logic has been thrown out the window. So the baby has been thrown out with the bathwater.
Logic hasn't been thrown out the window. They're acting exactly as you would expect a narcissist to act. Logically, they are playing their role.
Yeah.
We are illogical in thinking that we can keep reasoning with them through rational thinking, because there's this whole faction of the left. They just knew how cruel they were being. Meanwhile, the White House is sending memes from their Twitter account about human rights abuses. And it's just like, no, guys, the cruelty is the point. Can we stop acting like they just don't know better?
When it's like,
there's not economic incentives or power incentives for them to act any differently. They're acting in exactly the guardrails that are provided. So change the fucking guardrails.
To bring it home, what are you going to do this week to protect your self-care? I know the biggest thing is this podcast and having a box where we can process everything that's happening in real time and put it away when it's not during this hour on Sunday. That's how I'm protecting my self-care this week. I'm looking forward to next Sunday. I have a place to process, which honestly is so nice.
I'm going to put together some structure for this, which will make me feel better and give me a way to be productive around that, creating infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And probably taking myself on an artist date.
Yes.
As Julia Cameron would describe it.
Yes.
I don't know. We just talked about comedy. I didn't have any new material to suggest. So there is a part of me that now feels like I should go deep dive there. I'm in New York this week, so maybe I'll go to the West Village. I don't know. Like,
honestly, go to the Smithsonian. Well, no, that's in DC.
No, I'll be in DC soon though, and I'm gonna go to every Smithsonian and see every woman. Such a bummer. It's such a predictable bummer. I'll leave it with like this hope though. To that point, like, it is an unbelievable bummer that that's where we're going, but in comparison to when this has happened at any other point in contemporary history, we have more tools at our disposal outside of the control of the nation state to ensure that if we want to archive something and we want to produce something outside of those controls, we can.
That is very hopeful.
The balance to the grief of our freedom from, like, that needs to be counterbalanced in our joy of freedom too. And I think we're stuck in our grief of freedom from right now. And we need to like metabolize that anger and grief into energy and excitement for freedom too. Something to think about.
I'll think about that throughout this week. What am I? I'm always coming back to like, what am I for? Not what I'm against. What am I for?
Joy is a form of resistance. Connection
Amen.
is a form of resistance. Love is a form of resistance.
Loving oneself is also a very strong form of resistance.
Exactly. So do that.